This man underwent brain surgery 3,500 years ago. Researchers discovered a punctured skull below the floor of a home in what is now Israel. Can you imagine? While excavating a 3,500-year-old tomb in Tel Megiddo, that is Megiddon, scientists discovered a skull with a surprising feature. It had a square hole that's clear evidence of an ancient brain surgery, trepanation as we would say today. Nobody knows whose steady hands performed the operation or what experience made the surgeon feel prepared to remove part of a living human's cranium. Was the patient administered some anesthesia or mind-altering substance, or was he left to experience the operation in excruciating pain? And what desperate straits or last-ditch hopes led to such an extreme step to perform this operation? I can only hypothesize, based off the amount of pathological evidence, that this is an individual that was an intervention because of a deteriorating condition, says Rachel Kalischer, bioarchaeologist at Brown University, but we don't really have a clear answer, she said. Kalischer and her colleagues the study published Wednesday in PLOS ONE describes the remains of two Bronze Age brothers entombed together in an elite neighborhood of Tel Megiddo. Both siblings, who lived between 1550 and 1450 BC, show signs of developmental problems and chronic disease, while one sibling has the unusual evidence of an ancient brain surgery. It's known as trepanation. The procedure involves putting a hole in the human head by drilling, cutting, or scraping the skull. Such surgeries did occur among the ancient peoples around the world, but it's relatively rare to find evidence of trepanation in the Middle East. So what prompted this particular medical intervention? Kalischer's theory is that the brothers' social status may have afforded them the care and resources to survive their disease longer than the less fortunate. After one brother died, the other might have sought out the skull surgery in a desperate attempt to relieve his debilitating symptoms, one that sadly proved unsuccessful. The brothers identified as siblings through analysis of their ancient DNA. They were buried underneath the floors of their family home in the wealthy Bronze Age city that straddled trade routes between Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia of today's Turkey. The fortified urban center is rich with temples and monumental architecture. The then common practice of burying the deceased in the family home is a boon for archaeologists, as it allows researchers to match human remains with the locations the person frequented and the artifacts they used in life. The brothers' final resting place was a residence with upscale architecture, fine examples of pottery and worked bone, and precious metals, which all point to a well-to-do family. The site was in a prime spot close to the palace and the city's main entrance gates. The brothers were also afforded burial rites appropriate for the upper class. They were entombed with fine pottery and offered offerings of food. Analysis of the grave and body position revealed that one brother died in his late teens or early 20s and was buried 1 to 3 years before the other. When his sibling succumbed after his unsuccessful surgery at age 21 or older, the previously deceased brother was exhumed so the two could be buried together, a common practice in the area during the Bronze Age. Kalischer sees the joint burial as a reaffirmation of the familial social connections between these two brothers. They were presumably cared for during long illnesses, and they were afforded the same burial rites and traditions as others of their status. It suggests that their society valued them despite their debilitating conditions. The brothers suffered from multiple ailments. Their skeletons show signs of congenital or developmental anomalies like additional teeth that did not erupt. The brother who had the trepanation, the hole in the skull, also had skull bones that did not fuse together normally during infancy. Why is that? So both siblings' bones also show infectious lesions acquired through as a yet unknown disease, which might have been leprosy. The skeletons' many lesions likely show that they lived with the disease for an extended period of time. Socioeconomics may have something to do with how the brother survived. Kalischer says if people have the means to access medical care or a special diet, they might survive longer than individuals who did not have those means, obviously. In the heavily studied Levant region, which includes Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and the Palestinian territories, relatively few examples of trepanation turned up. Researchers uncovered only about a dozen cases, and Kalischer says this may reflect how infrequently these things occurred in the past. Obviously, to do this was brain surgery, ancient brain surgery. You can see from the hole in the skull. I don't even know what kind of things were used there. But anyway, this would have been painful for the patient as well. Now, cut marks on the skull show where the scalp was opened up. The scalp was opened up, the first step in the procedure. The ancient surgeon then removed 1.2-inch square piece of the skull's frontal bone, apparently by making a series of parallel groove-like cuts, and later prying loose pieces of the skull away, which were found among the skeletal remains. Kalischer and colleagues believe that the patient was alive when the operation was performed. The color and beveling of the hole edges show the cut was made into living bone, and care was taken not to puncture the tissue overlaying the brain. But because no signs of post-operation bone growth exist, it seems likely that the patient died during the surgery or shortly thereafter. Boston University neurosurgeon and trepanation researcher Emanuela Binello says this cut's location over a venous structure called the superior sagittal sinus is in a particularly dangerous spot on the skull, which makes it more likely that the patient did not survive the procedure. She said if you compromise that vein, it'll cause torrential bleeding, or if you press it too much, it will cause excessive brain swelling and death. And she notes it's a very tricky spot, even for us nowadays, and it's an area to be handled with extreme care. It's speculation, but I would not be surprised if they got into it and had bleeding that they could not control, she said. Trepanation of the skull was practiced across the ancient world, both for medical reasons like easing trauma from a head injury and for seemingly ritual ones like releasing evil spirits from the head. Evidence of such surgeries dating back thousands of years has been found across Africa, with one study claiming to have uncovered an example as early as 7,000 years ago in Sudan. A mummified woman from a tomb in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region shows that trepanation was practiced there by 1600 BC. The Greeks and Romans adopted the practice, which continued through Europe's medieval era. But ancient brain surgery appears to have been most common in the Americas, among the Andes people of Peru and Bolivia. Tulane University anthropologist John Verano wrote the book on the practice there and has documented more than 800 cases in the region, perhaps as many as across the rest of the ancient world combined. By the time of the Incas, about 1400 to 1500 AD, survival rates from such operations reached an amazing 75 to 80%. The best explanation of why trepanation was so commonly practiced in Peru was to treat skull fractures and other complications of blows to the head, Verano says. The practice can relieve pressure building on the brain from fluids and swelling caused by head injuries. The trepanation method, linear cuts creating a rectangular opening, shown in this article, was relatively common in central highland Peru in late pre-Hispanic times, although it was not particularly successful compared to other methods like scraping and circular grooving. But while the method employed in Megiddo may be similar to one employed in Peru, no sign of head trauma exists, so the operation likely was not occasioned by a single traumatic event. Binello says that the extreme measure of cranial surgery might have been adopted as a last resort by a caring family. She says this individual looks like he was a sick person for a long time with all those bone lesions, so I do think the corroborating evidence from the rest of the body points to some intended therapeutic benefit to this. As she notes, I suspect some of the motivation was the perennial one through time, an attempt to try to alleviate the pain and suffering of our loved ones, she said. bizarre, isn't it? This is by Brian Handwork on Collective Spark. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box